Namaskar, this is Devika Nadig for Shikshangan Education Initiatives, and this video and this channel is our effort to bring zero cost to consumer ideas in education in the K-12 sector and even beyond. Today we are presenting the strategy of scaffolding a learner who needs that little bit of adult or peer assistance to move to the zone where it's slightly more difficult than where the learner is at the moment. We are aware of Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, and scaffolding strategies are ideas which are born out of the same research that Vygotsky did in the late 70s. So this idea about scaffolding and this video is time-stamped for your convenience and so that you are able to really navigate to that which is of your interest. Why use scaffolding at all? It is an academic lifesaver, as it is said, because it is helping our learners and our students to perform tasks which would be very difficult for them to learn on their own. So they are at a level where they've got the potential to learn that and go higher, but they need some assistance, and that is the way scaffolding helps. So therefore, it's allowing our teaching to move forward and move backward. Now, why am I saying that? Because you're moving forward by preparing the learner to that which is the ultimate learning goal or objective. You're also moving backward because you cannot move forward and you cannot scaffold until you know what is the prerequisite relevant knowledge which is required for this learner to move ahead. So therefore, it fills in the gap, the missing gap of learning in today's learning, and the gaps are enormous and they are very, very large now once the kids have come back after the pandemic. So you fill those up and then you prepare the student for the future challenges that they need to know. And the beauty about scaffolding is it actually helps all the learners at all the content areas in all the levels of the school. Everybody needs scaffolding at one time or the other in life, regardless of whether you're in school, whether you're learning teaching, whether you're learning any other skill that might interest you in life. The scaffolding strategy, if we are able to execute it well in our classrooms, it actually fosters self-reliance in students, a quality which is called out very, very strongly in the National Education Policy 2020 of India. Self-regulated learning, self-reliant learners. That's what scaffolding is all about. So there is a learning outcome up there. We are planning the learning activities and the teaching activities such that you assist the learner, scaffold the learning to get to the top. As we know, a scaffold in construction is something that the workers use as a support to climb up and get to the goal. Similarly, in education, scaffolding is something that you give to the student as a temporary support to climb up to the learning outcomes. Let's begin with Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. And we might recall some of it. We've all prepared to become teachers, those of us who have been teachers or are still practicing teachers. So what is Vygotsky saying? Sometime in the late 70s, he observed that there are two levels of learning. One, where the learners are right now, and two, what their potential development can be. It's just a stretch beyond their current position. But it can be reached. That's the beauty. It can be reached. How? I mean, this is known as the zone of proximal development, or ZPD as it is popularly called. And the learner cannot do, even with help, is where the black zone is. And when you get the scaffolding in the ZPD zone, then a learner becomes self-reliant and independent and moves to the zone, which is now complete concept attainment. Okay? Let's understand that in a diagrammatic fashion. So these are two areas, the two red triangles are actually communicating to you. One is an area which is too easy. That means the learner has already achieved all these learning outcomes. Then he has to reach, or she has to reach, a goal which is at the moment looking too complicated and hard to achieve, hard to reach. The green band in the center is what is the zone of proximal development, ZPD from now on, for those of us who are encountering this idea for the first time. So what happens? There is a new concept that the teacher introduces in the class. And what does she do, she or he do? So they are assisting the learning. This assisting of learning is what is actually known as scaffolding, supporting the learner. Not necessarily only those learners who are struggling and who are lagging behind. Of course, for them, we do more scaffolding, but sometimes scaffolding is to be done for all learners. Like we said, we all have used scaffolding at some time or the other in our lives. Once that is done, and when the student says that now I'm becoming independent and I understand this, that is when the concept is grasped. Therefore, scaffolding is always a temporary measure that we use. The minute the learner becomes strong, you take away the scaffolding. Like it was said right at the beginning, that scaffolding must be taken away when the house is ready. Okay, that's the way we do even in education. I love this gif, so I thought I'd put it there. If we don't practice ZPD or scaffolding in the ZPD, then our learners might end up saying, I always used to come so close, but I didn't get it. I was so close, but I didn't get it. And which is why I'm proving my point of scaffolding is extremely, extremely important as a strategy to practice. There are two ways of looking at scaffolding, because you've got to rein in everything which is so beautiful, and there's a sweeping scope of scaffolding. So let's divide that and make it easy for us to look at it in two categories. One is known as the scaffolding strategies, and most of us are practicing these, and this video will just call them out. And the other is scaffolding devices. Maybe we're not familiar with this, and I hope you enjoy what we're going to present as activities throughout the video right till the end. So do stay with me and watch, because I'm going to attempt to give examples from all the subjects that are there in school. The first requirement, of course, is that we need to identify what is the missing relevant background knowledge or prerequisite knowledge. So once we are, where is that? That is in our long-term memory. It's there, we've gathered through all the data and sensory gathering that we have it in our long-term memory. We identify that, we bring that out by activating prior knowledge like we do through our robust lesson plans, and only when we have done that will we be able to plan our scaffold. Let's begin by talking about what are scaffolding strategies, and then we will go to scaffolding devices. And there will be plenty of examples throughout this video. Scaffolding strategies, there is a teacher's role. She puts the scaffold so that you can reach the goal of breaking your mango or breaking your apple or whatever it is you're really aspiring for. Now, these are strategies we're familiar with. Like I said, whenever we use first language as a bridge to come across to the language of instruction, which could be English in many of the schools. Whenever we are reading aloud, we do all of this, right? Whenever we are modeling, and when we have gestures to show that this is the way this is what I mean to say when I'm saying that, when we say there is a bird, and whatever other modeling that we do. Whenever we assign small group work so that they learn from each other, some sentence starters, success starters that we use in our classrooms. Whenever we connect to background knowledge, so at the beginning of the class, we say activate prior knowledge, and that is also scaffolding learning, because you're bringing out the brick of knowledge on which new mortar needs to be fitted and a new brick of knowledge needs to be fixed to make the wall strong. Use of graphic organizers is very powerful strategy for scaffolding. We have an entire module on graphic organizers, and you might want to go back to that and see what did we say for the 6 graphic organizers that Shikshangan actually recommends. Whenever we use visuals and realia, particularly for teaching vocabulary, we have another module and vocabulary, and you might want to go back to that as well and see how can you make vocabulary visual. These are a few strategies which are used for scaffolding the learner, and you might say, what's new? Okay, we are using those, of course, but I might want to illustrate some with example. What about annotation? Annotation and highlighting is a scaffolding strategy we may or may not be teaching our students. Whenever they are becoming fluent readers, and when you think they're ready to take down notes, teach them to annotate. Teach them what annotation means, what are the various symbols and signs denoting, create your own key for that, and teach the children to annotate. This is a very bad example of highlighting. You're not supposed to highlight everything. So also teach them how to highlight, which means you're teaching them what are the key ideas, which means you are actually scaffolding their learning whenever they go back to that passage. The same thing continues when they are reading something. So when they're reading, first familiarize your students with what are the kind of questions they should be asking of their own self while they are reading. What is the story about? Can you retell the story? Can I do this? Is it fiction or non-fiction? Why am I reading this piece? And so on. Once they are clear about their reading, teach them annotating. So annotating and the use of post-its today, the color post-its that students use and we also use for tagging, for highlighting, for marking important ideas, should be widely and profusely used in your reading classes. And that doesn't mean reading only for the literature and language class, reading for any subject. So use of highlighting, use of annotation, use of post-its is one example of practicing a scaffolding strategy. Learners can go back and it becomes easy for them. Then there are some scaffolding devices. Remember, I said there are two ways of looking at scaffolding. Scaffolding strategies that we just talked about, and now we are moving to scaffolding devices. That is tangible stuff that the students have with them and they carry with them. So identify the prerequisite skills first, like we said, and then create the devices. These are known as cheat sheets. Now, this is probably something that we need to break our, all our conformity about this word cheat. It just means a help sheet, actually. And you will find plenty of cheat sheets everywhere, and Shikshangan would be very happy to give them to you if you actually put down in our comment section about what kind of cheat sheets would you be looking for your subjects. This is a cheat sheet for mathematics. This could be another one for, let's say, writing and language. What kind of writing checklist you have, a punctuation checklist that you might have, something which is about geographical facts. So these are like bookmarks and little cards and little sheets that students are allowed to carry with them in their little pencil boxes to school. So there is a buy-in from everyone that these are struggling students. They need some assistance because we are scaffolding their learning. They are not cheating. They are just being assisted to learn with some kind of help, additional help from the teacher, and the peers also support this. So that's one example. Here's another example of scaffolding devices. Again, punctuation. So which mark stands for what? Could be something that the students have with them. I love this one about geographical facts because, it's very hard to imagine the globe and the latitudes and the longitudes. So when you say that, well, the North American continent and Europe are actually at the same latitude, then have this moving map where they can see it for themselves, and this becomes a scaffolding device for their learning. Multiplication based on arithmetic, very difficult for many students to get it, and we also use language like borrow one and so on. So when you highlight what is happening in the operation and when you also verbalize it as you are teaching, it becomes a scaffolding device. Long division, a struggle for so many students. So again, highlight the steps in a different color. The arrows are pointing to which number from where do you take down, where do you put the decimal point, etc. These are cards that they carry, and these are some examples of scaffolding devices. Here is one more which is quite marvelous. So suppose you're teaching something about earthquake. Let them carry a fact cards with them, both true and false. For example, some evidence indicates that animals can predict earthquake. You tell me, true or false? Of course it's true. Earth is not alone in experiencing quakes. In fact, the moon has similar waves called moonquakes. True or false? True. Okay. Earthquakes are caused by friction between giant plates. True again. So as you can see, there are greens which are true and there are reds which are false. For example, scientists can accurately predict earthquakes so that residents will have time to prepare. Of course not. If that was so, we would never have had any casualties in earthquakes. You should immediately take cover under a building or under a tree. These are all grandma's tales, really, but it is not a fact. It is false. So students are allowed to carry these kind of cards, which are fact cards. So that was what I wanted to say about scaffolding the learner. So scaffolding, and there's so much of scaffolding happening in the natural world, in the animal kingdom. Even as adults and humans and babies, we are teaching children so much about how to walk, how to talk, and so on. Why do we give it up when they become older and when they are in school? Look at the way the babies are being assisted to climb in the animal world as well, and birds are being assisted to fly by their parents as well. So scaffold the learning in your class. This is what we wanted to say. Number one, identify what is the relevant background knowledge. Number two, prepare scaffolding devices. Number three, also have some scaffolding strategies in practice. This is a great learning that we have got from Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. We're calling it scaffolding today. Thank you for watching. If you like what we present to you, do subscribe to our channel. This is Devika Nadig.